Chosen one. There are places where the air forgets itself until you arrive. A lobby humming with anxious heel taps, a cafe where conversation skitters like loose paper in a draft, a long table dressed in the armor of small talk, each holds its breath without knowing it. Then you cross the threshold, and a subtle correction moves through the room. It isn't spectacle, it isn't volume, it's architecture. Pressure equalized, angles softened, an invisible frame set into place so everything stands straighter by instinct. People would call it charisma because they don't yet have language for climate. But climate is what you carry. You bring weather that favors growth. Your presence is never demand, it is an arrangement. Shoes find the floor instead of the future. Eyes land rather than scan. Even the glassware behaves, no shrill clinking, only the quiet punctuation of civility. Feminine women sense this first in their bodies, long before their minds file a report. Shoulders slip from their ears, breath sinks back to the belly, the low animal vigilance that keeps score of exits and angles takes a seat and listens. Nothing has been said. Everything has been told. The room has learned, through you, how to be a better room. It begins with what you govern in private. Hours left unadvertised have tuned you for steadiness. The sweat nobody applauded, the reading no one graded, the prayers or silences that stitched your inner seams. Those choices leave a scent the world can't name but trusts immediately. The atmosphere of you says a simple sentence in 1,000 dialects. Here, reality and kindness get along. It's in your posture, neither apologetic nor predatory, in your pace unhurried without ever being idle, in your eyes which carry light the way old windows carry history. You do not take oxygen, you make it. A woman at the corner of the table notices before she admits it. Her laugh alters pitch, less porcelain, more bell. Another one, who came rehearsed in the lines she always uses to survive gatherings, finds herself ad-libbing joy. The host relaxes 3 degrees and becomes generous instead of just organized. You open your hands to greet someone, and without meaning to, you grant a permission the evening didn't know it needed. The permission to be honest without paying for it later. Atmosphere is not neutral, it is moral. Under yours, pretense loses its budget. Small courtesies, the ones many men perform as strategy, have in you the weight of policy. You thank by name, not title. You wait a beat after a joke so the quiet voice that needed a breath can land. You step aside as if space were a resource you are responsible for stewarding, because it is. These gestures accumulate like rainfall. The soil of the room loosens. Conversation becomes a river again instead of a series of puddles to hop. Where water moves, life decides it can try again. Feminine women drift closer, without quite understanding why. Their reasons will arrive later. Their bodies have already voted. Your silence participates. It is not the sulking absence of ego, but the warm presence of attention. When you aren't speaking, you are listening with your face. Brow unknotted, jaw unarmed, gaze holding as if sound were a creature you respect enough not to startle. In that silence, stories lengthen of their own accord. Details that would have died in the rush of performance survive to blossom into meaning. A woman hears herself say the true thing she meant to say, and she recognizes the invisible host of that truth, the atmosphere you keep. People often mistake comfort for safety. Around you, they experience both and learn the difference. Comfort is furniture. Safety is structure. You are the beams hidden behind the paint. You do not need to be noticed to hold weight. And yet, the room notices anyway. In the same unconscious way you notice that a house built well does not creak in the wrong places. Laughter arrives and does not curdle. Disagreement walks in and is seated properly, given cutlery, treated as a guest rather than a burglar. There is a rightness that allows friction without fire. Women recognize it in a heartbeat. Their nervous systems, ancient and wise, stand down. Watch how an ordinary hour edits itself in your company. The server missteps, and you rescue her dignity before the tray rescues the glasses. A newcomer hovers, and you widen the circle without making him perform an introduction. Someone overreaches a story, and you return it gently to breathable scale, not with correction, but with a question that gives truth a lane to run in. A woman catches this choreography and files it not as flirting, but as competence. It is shocking how attractive competence becomes when it is devoted to the common good rather than applause. She will call it magnetism later. What she means is governance. You do not hoard the attention you generate. You redistribute it like a good economy. When eyes come to you, you send them back out with interest. To the artist who brought her shy work, to the elder whose memory needs a patient runway, to the friend who only shines when the spotlight is not blinding. The atmosphere of you converts spectators into participants. Rooms become communities in real time. Heat turns to warmth, brightness turns to light, and light, correctly aimed, makes everything more itself. If a storm enters, because storms always do, you do not pretend the windows are soundproof. You let the thunder have its name. Then you lower the room's pulse with a sentence that fits in the hand, a plan that fits on the table, a tone that refuses panic the steering wheel. The atmosphere of you in crisis is simply your daily atmosphere with the volume turned up. Clear, kind, exact. People discover that adrenaline can be told the truth without being given authority. They learn this because you learned it first, alone, when it cost. When you leave, the air lingers improved. Conversations that were improbable 5 minutes earlier continue as if you were still holding the door for them. The host will stack plates and wonder why the night felt like grace. The woman who angled her chair toward you will walk home, feeling heavier in the best way, full, like a room whose shelves are finally holding the right books. The atmosphere of you travels with her a few blocks, then becomes her own. That is how you know it was real. Real climates make climates in others. She will return to you, not to borrow weather, but because she remembers where she first breathed like that and wants to breathe like that again. A gaze can be a net or a harbor. Yours is the second. It does not trawl, it welcomes. Feminine women step into it and discover a coastline drawn with accuracy and mercy. Lines that protect without trapping, waters deep enough for honesty, light set at the mouth so returning is easy. The gravity of your gaze is not the heavy pull of hunger. It is the steady pull of recognition. It says, I see the person, not the performance. And because we become what we are seen as, something in her straightens and softens at the same time. You do not look around so much as you look into. The difference is felt in the first second. Eyes that roam broadcast a scarcity economy, the anxious search for better. Eyes that land announce sufficiency. When your gaze arrives, it does so like a hand that has already washed, clean, unhurried, dignified. It takes in what is offered and does not inventory what is withheld. A woman who has learned to brace for appraisal meets that and feels a machine inside her power down. The hum of vigilance recedes. The quieter frequencies of herself come back online. There is no trick in the way you see. It is discipline. You have trained your attention to prefer meaning over novelty. You let your eyes ask better questions than, is she beautiful? They ask, what lights her when she speaks? Where is the strength hiding behind that careful sentence? What cost did that laugh conceal? The body recognizes being regarded in this way and opens the correct doors. Shoulders ease. Hands find their natural place. The voice drops to its real key. In your gaze, the mirror she carries begins to tell the truth again. You can hold a woman with your eyes without holding her hostage. This is a skill learned in the invisible curriculum of respect. You look long enough to honor, not long enough to harvest. You turn away not to withhold, but to let her feel the power of her own gravity in the space you've studied. Curiosity does not make you lean in and take, it makes you make room. She finds herself stepping closer of her own will. The story the culture tells, of eyes as weapons, of attention as a theft, quietly loses jurisdiction in your presence. Your gaze revises the law. To see is to serve. It does not flatter for sport. When you compliment, your sight has done its homework. You do not generalize beauty into a blur. You name the exact thing that deserves to be seen. The way she builds a sentence like a bridge and walks others across. The courage that trembles but still chooses open ground. The humor hiding in her restraint that you treat as treasure, not target. Accuracy is the native language of the soul. When you speak it, color returns to the face that forgot it had 1,000 shades. Sometimes your gaze says nothing out loud and does more work than paragraphs. In a meeting where her idea is being rounded and sanded by the dull knives of indifference, your eyes find hers and hold, steady, unsurprised, allied. You nod a millimeter. Proceed. She proceeds. Rooms are moved by small permissions given at the right moment. Your eyes are licensed to issue them, because they are never counterfeit. You only mint what you can back with action later. Trust recognizes this and deposits more of itself with every look. You have learned to read weather and not accuse the sky. A flash of frost across her expression does not send you into retreat or chase. You adjust the temperature by changing your distance, your angle, your tone. You let her clouds be clouds while keeping the barometer honest. The gravity of your gaze pulls storms toward explanation rather than escalation. "I'm here when you're ready" is a sentence your eyes know how to speak. Ready arrives faster when hunted by no one. If desire lives in the room, and often it will, it is made beautiful by how you see. Heat under your gaze does not turn into a transaction. It becomes art. You look as a craftsman studies a material he respects. With patience for grain, with love for edges, with an understanding that pressure must be precise to be kind. Your eyes ask the body to answer only what the spirit has already said yes to. In that order, attraction keeps its innocence. Consumed, it would have burned and been forgotten. Seen, it ripens and is remembered. There is a way you attend to departures that proves the honesty of your attention in arrivals. You do not let your gaze linger like a hook as you leave the conversation. You unplug cleanly with a warmth that confirms you are present and a boundary that confirms you are governed. "I want to hear the rest," you say, and your eyes make a promise your calendar keeps. She watches you cross the room and feels a surprising ease rather than a vacuum. Gravity does not vanish when the planet rotates. It remains, quietly orchestrating tides. You look at the world beyond faces with the same devotion, and that devotion amplifies what your eyes do when they return to her. You notice small competence, a barista's choreography, a janitor's perfectionist corner, the way an old man packs a bag with the logic of decades. You let these scenes polish your sight. You practice awe where it is free to the careful. Thus trained, your gaze offers dignity as second nature. She stands in the light of it and finds her posture redeemed from the slump that daily indifference teaches. In grief, your gaze does its greatest work. Words, at the edge of loss, often ruin what they mean to carry. Your eyes learn to be a shoreline where pain can sit without drowning. You do not look away from puffy eyes or a tremor in the lip. You let your own soften to hold the weight without dropping it or rushing to repackage it into lesson. People heal in the climate of being seen without being edited. Women return to you because your gaze does not require them to be finished in order to be beautiful. The gravity of your gaze is also a gate for your own soul. You refuse to look at what would shrink you. You refuse to keep looking at what you cannot honor. You look long at what enlarges your capacity to love, craft, courage, kindness, and you become what you behold. This is not mystical rhetoric. It is neurological reality, baptized into daily practice. When your eyes come back to her, they carry the imprint of what they have been faithful to. She reads in them a map of the realms you protect, and, without ceremony, chooses to walk those roads with you. And so, yes, they are mesmerized. Not in the cheap, dizzy sense of losing themselves, but in the ancient, sacred sense of remembering themselves under a seeing that does not distort. Your gaze holds like gravity, constant, generous, precise. It invites return because return there is healthy. It makes circles around you that are not orbits of dependency, but paths of communion. Rooms where the feminine is radiant because the masculine is governed. The eyes are famous for being windows. Yours are also foundations. Standing on them, a woman looks out and thinks, "I can build here." Then she does. Chosen one, there is a stillness in you that is not the absence of movement, but the mastery of it. It is the held note that steadies the choir, the deep root that lets the tree speak with leaves instead of fear. You are not frozen, you are governed. You learn that stillness is not a retreat from life, but the position from which life can be faced without wasting it. The practice began in hours no one witnessed, when impatience scratched at your ribs and you refused to audition for chaos. Breath by measured breath, you taught your pulse to argue with nothing but truth. Over time, this became an aura, a climate that travels with you like weather that favors growth. In crowded places, your stillness chooses the pace. You don't quicken just because the hallway does. Your stride confirms that urgency and importance are rarely the same thing. People, without knowing why, time themselves to you. A woman who has lived all day at speeds that bruise her sense of self draws beside you and discovers that her steps lengthen, her shoulders recede from her ears, her sentences find punctuation. It is not hypnosis, it is relief. Your steadiness is a permission she didn't know she was waiting to receive. Stillness is visible in your posture long before it is heard in your words. You stand as if gravity were an ally rather than a sentence. Your shoulders bear their history without boasting. Your hands rest where hands rest when they could lift anything and don't need to prove it. Your gaze is alert but not hungry, as though the world were safe in your sight even when it is not safe in its own. You move like someone who trusts the floor. Trust like this becomes contagious. Feminine women, who have become experts in reading subterranean currents, sense in you a foundation that won't crumble under their weight. Bracing begins to feel inefficient. Softness begins to make more sense than armor. Your stillness is not a refusal to feel. It is the refusal to let feeling pilot the vehicle. Anger knocks, and you open the door without handing it the map. Joy arrives and finds a hearth instead of a fuse. Grief sits down and is not hurried. You can host weather without flooding anyone else. When a woman brings her storm, she finds you not as a barricade, but as a harbor. Solid breakwater, clean charts, a lantern set where returning is easy. She learns that emotional volume doesn't frighten you into control or silence you into absence. She can be large beside you without you becoming small or needing her to shrink. In rooms that mistake noise for leadership, your stillness is subversive. You do not compete for inches of air with men who inflate themselves like parade balloons. You let their helium find the ceiling while you keep your feet on the ground where decisions are actually made. When a moment requires direction, your words are few and well placed, the way a craftsman places nails. They hold. People discover that quiet can be a command when it belongs to someone who knows where he is going. Women notice the economy of your sentences and understand the valuation behind them. You are careful with speech because you are careful with impact. Crisis exposes counterfeit calm and confirms the genuine. A glass shatters, a child cries, a plan snaps under its own weight, and your stillness becomes architecture. You do not sprint in circles. You assign a task, you lower the room's pulse with the temperature of your voice, you move only as much as the solution requires. When the worst imagines it has the stage, you dim the lights and give it only what it needs to be handled. People breathe again, not because nothing bad happened, but because something good took charge. Feminine women memorize the sensation. Fear arrived, and the man beside me did not abandon himself. Adrenaline will forget that you are competent. Their bodies never will. Even your humor is governed by stillness. You don't chase laughs, you allow them. Timing works for you because you are patient with silence. The joke lands and heals instead of cutting because you never use wit to spend someone else's dignity. Laughter around you folds into warmth rather than frenzy, a sustainable fuel that keeps community lit without burning anyone's house down. It seems minor until someone remembers how many rooms they've left drained by louder men who performed vitality and then vanished. Your levity sits on bedrock. That difference is addictive. You protect stillness with rituals that look ordinary to those who do not know what they cost. Sleep on purpose, water on purpose, iron on purpose, prayer or breath, or some reverent stillness on purpose. You say no to gatherings that mistake a crowd for connection. You leave on time so tomorrow doesn't pay for tonight. You keep your word so your nervous system recognizes the man it lives inside. Over weeks and months, these decisions ripen into a recognizable weather pattern. She steps into it and can tell that this wasn't staged for her. It is how you live. That knowledge turns proximity into ease and admiration into trust. There is a gentleness, too, braided through the spine of your calm. You pour water as if glass matters. You listen with your face as if words do more than inform. You touch the world like a man who expects it to continue after he passes. Chairs return to their tables, doors quiet on their hinges, tools cleaned and put away. Small, unglamorous mercies seal a stillness that would otherwise be mistaken for detachment. They reveal that you are here, fully, not as a statue to admire, but as a steward to rely on. When you must say no, and you must, you do it with the exactness that makes growth possible. Your boundary is not a dare, It is a line painted straight by a steady hand. It doesn't wobble in heat or vanish under pressure. Women learn the contour of your values by how they hold under stress, and in that, learning their own values feels safer to be voiced. Stillness rescues conviction from theatrics. It lets disagreement become a way forward instead of a wall. Finally, your stillness leaves rooms better than it found them. After you go, conversations continue in lower registers. People distribute their attention like you distributed yours, toward the quiet, toward the overlooked, toward what's true. A woman walking home feels unexplainably well, like a lake after wind has stopped insisting. She does not credit you with magic, she credits you with honor. She wants to be near you again for the simplest of reasons. Her own best self is easier to reach within the radius of your calm. That is the mesmerism you never tried to manufacture. It is the natural gravity of a man who wears stillness, not as armor, but as a gift. Your voice, chosen one, is not merely sound, it is shelter. It arrives with the timbre of rooms where people are allowed to be whole. Even before content, tone does its quiet work. Low enough to calm, clear enough to carry, paced so that meaning has muscles. When you speak, feminine women do not experience the usual reflex to brace or perform. The body hears. Here is a man who won't use volume to trespass or cleverness to evade. The nervous system registers a threshold crossed and tells the heart, you can set your bags down for a while. You learn to make your voice a home by first refusing to make it a weapon. There were days when sharpness would have won you the moment. You chose coherence instead. There were hours when performance could have purchased admiration. You chose accuracy, and you paid the price of being under-celebrated in public so you could be trusted in private. You practiced the old disciplines that good voices require. You listened more than you spoke, and when you spoke, you said the thing you could stand by tomorrow. You found that apology is a key that opens rooms pride only locks, and you kept that key close. All of this became audible long before anyone could articulate why you are easier to be alive beside. Your voice knows how to lower a room's pulse without sedating its spirit. At a table where conversation tangles into competing solos, you cut a small doorway with a single sentence that centers purpose. In a meeting drifting toward vanity metrics, you pose the question that brings the work back to people. In a kitchen where an old hurt has begun to leak under the cupboard door, you say the simple truth with gentleness that refuses to turn honesty into spectacle. The sound you make is never a performance for an invisible jury. It is the correct tool chosen for the material in front of you. A woman will remember the first time your voice handled her vulnerability without causing secondary damage. She brought you something raw, a story skinned by the day, a fear with its teeth still in it, and you did not rush to cauterize it with advice. You let the words be blood-warm and real, asked 2 clean questions, and then offered the kind of counsel that does not steal agency. Sometimes you offered none, only presence shaped into phrases that hold. I hear you. I'm not going anywhere. We can move when you're ready. Her body learned in that moment that your voice can sit still with pain, can share a room with it without needing to bully it into being useful. Your voice is hospitable to laughter. Humor arrives through it with a warmth that uplifts instead of undressing. You do not aim jokes at the softest target to prove that you are quick. You set the joke down like a candle on a table so everyone can see one another more kindly. Feminine women find themselves laughing at things that would ordinarily slide past them. Small absurdities of the day, the charming failures of being human, because your tone says we are on the same side of the ridiculous. They associate your sound with relief, and relief is a door that people step through again and again without thinking. It feels like home, because home is where we are allowed to lay burdens down without being told how impressively we carried them. Your voice carries respect, even when circumstance does not. To the server who's behind, to the guard who's strict, to the child interrupting adult sentences. You speak with a consistent gentleness that refuses to purchase status by spending someone else's dignity. The opposite habit is common and contagious. Yours is rarer and healing. Women watch how you speak to those who can do nothing for you and understand that the tone would not change when the room is smaller and the stakes are only love. That confidence lowers the cost of honesty. Honest women are luminous. Your voice invites that light. There is a way you use silence that voices envy. You leave space around sentences the way architects leave courtyards around buildings, to invite light, to make passage, to prevent the claustrophobia of cleverness. You don't rush to fill the air just because air is available. When you ask a question, you let it land, and your quiet tells the truth about your motives. You are here to receive, not to harvest. She hears herself in that space and realizes how rare it is to feel accompanied without being managed. The memory will outlast the details. She will recall, not the exact words exchanged, but the texture of a conversation that preserved both of you. Your voice can say no with the mercy that keeps a door from becoming a wall. Boundaries spoken in your tone do not humiliate. They clarify. You do not raise your voice to make your point formidable. You lower it to make your point inhabitable. Even those who disagree find themselves calm enough to understand what they are disagreeing with. A woman who has known men whose no's were punishments will be astonished by how yours can protect both of you at once. She will learn, by repetition, that love is safest where the word no arrives cleanly and early and without a receipt. In crisis, your voice proves its training. While others announce the magnitude of the problem, your sentences shrink the moment into solvable pieces. You call, I'll get the kit. We meet at the car. The cadence is slow enough to be heard, quick enough to outpace panic. Children obey it because it sounds like safety. Strangers obey it because it sounds like adulthood. The tone recovers quiet even as it moves. Later, when the room is back to itself, you do not relitigate heroics. The voice that handled danger refuses to harvest it for legend. That refusal is one more reason your sound feels like home. Home does not need to brag to be real. You treat compliments like tools, not trophies. You hand them out for construction, not for noise. You look amazing is true but incomplete. You reach for the more precise wrench. That color you chose makes your eyes look rested and proud. Great work is kind but generic. You prefer, the way you sequence those steps made the hard part seem inevitable. Specific praise doesn't inflate, it strengthens. The woman who hears it finds her spine cooperating with gravity, not fighting it. She walks a little taller, not to be seen, but because she can carry more of what she is without spill. She will trace that feeling back to your voice, the way people learn to navigate by a familiar landmark. You know when to make your voice small so another can hear her own. In groups, you angle conversation toward the person with the quietest contribution, and then protect the floor so it stays hers long enough for meaning to arrive. In private, you speak as though both of you are building a bridge to something worth crossing. Fewer adjectives, more verbs, enough pauses to seat the planks. You leave ego on the riverbank and discover that the structure holds. Feminine women cross it and find, on the other side, not a man who conquered them with rhetoric, but a partner whose words acted like tools in the right hands. And when the day is long and the hour tired, your voice can be ordinary without becoming careless. Text me when you're home is logistics with affection folded in. Eat first, then decide. Is philosophy disguised as dinner? I'll carry that. Is love that doesn't sermonize. Home is built out of such sentences. Modest timber, strong joinery, repeated use. Over months, your sound becomes a soundtrack to thriving. She associates it with rest, yes, but also with momentum that doesn't injure, with courage that doesn't grandstand, with intimacy that doesn't invoice. Without intending to, you have become the acoustic of her best self. So when she leans closer to hear you in a loud room, it is not merely to catch words. It is to step back into the place she knows how to breathe. When she calls you first with news, bright or brutal, it is because your tone teaches both celebration and consolation how to behave with dignity. When she asks for your opinion, it is because she trusts that your voice will never use hers as a stepping stone. This is why they want to be around you every time. Your voice feels like home, not because it flatters the ear, but because it furnishes the soul. A table sturdy enough for truth, a window large enough for light, a door that locks securely, and a hearth that never burns the house down. It begins where most people leak it, between the first small inconvenience and the second, in the tiny distance where frustration usually blooms into a performance. The barista is new and the line doubles back on itself. A driver cuts hard across 2 lanes, The email lands with blame disguised as urgency. You absorb the contact and refuse to multiply it. Your peace is not passive, it is a practiced conservation of force. You spend nothing you do not intend. The result is a room that remembers how to breathe when you enter it, a corridor that slows to the pace of sanity, a conversation that lowers its shoulders around your voice. Women feel it first in the places where the day has made them slender. A knot loosens at the base of the skull. Fingers unclasp from invisible railings. Their eyes stop scanning for the next thing that will go wrong because you refuse to send the signal that anything has to. You are not indifferent. Your attention is everywhere. But you do not mistake urgency for importance, and that difference is a bridge other people can cross without paying a toll in adrenaline. Your peace is architecture, load-bearing, quiet, honest, so floors hold and ceilings don't sag where you stand.